This is Will Stewart from OnlineChessLessons.net, and I'm going to be continuing my coverage of the 2011 Russian Team Championship. And this is a game between two solid 2,700 players, Fabiano Caruana against Pavel Eljanov. And the game starts off with a Ruy Lopez, and matters are quickly taken into a Berlin defense. So just to be clear, for all those that aren't familiar, this is essentially the start of the Ruy Lopez with bishop b5 and excluding any sidelines with a knight d4, quick knight d4, pretty much signifies the Ruy Lopez. And with knight f6 and castles, there's kind of standard Ruy Lopez lines, continuing with a6, bishop a4, and then b5, bishop b3, and it kind of branches off from there. The quick castles is also kind of a sideline, but with knight f6 and the immediate knight takes e4, this goes into the Berlin defense, which was made extremely popular by Vladimir Kramnik in his, I want to say, 2002 World Championship matches against Garry Kasparov. Not 100% sure of the date there. And so now d4, planning rook e1, and recouping the pawn and putting a little bit of pressure on Black's king. And the Berlin defense is based on this kind of strange-looking knight retreat, knight d6. And there's a ton of theory I don't want to go into on that, so not quite enough time for a video here. And so knight d6, putting some pressure, and the main point is the knight feels at home a good square on f5. And so after d takes c6, d takes e5, and knight f5, and after the queen trade to slightly misplace Black's king, or make it so he can't castle really, and knight c3. So there's a couple lines in the Berlin defense, and I think some start... There's definitely some chances for transposition. I've seen the immediate rook d1 check, I believe. Also, immediate knight c3 and h3, I believe, in some lines, which typically transposes. And so knight c3, and now bishop d7, and Caruana plays b3. The idea is, there's a couple different lines. Like I said, some lines with h3 intending an early g4. This is kind of a different idea, putting the bishop on the a1, h8 diagonal. And so Black wants to get his king out of the center, usually playing b6, followed by king b7 in this kind of setup. And so now bishop b2 and h5 to impede White advancing on the king side. So really a very common theme is that of the Berlin defense, sometimes Black can win on his positional advantage, that he has not so much a positional advantage, but that he has two bishops, and he can win by the fact that his position is very solid. Sometimes White tries to overstretch for a victory. And on the flip side, White has an advantage on the king side, a 4-3 pawn majority advantage. So if he can mobilize that by playing g4 and kind of f4, then he's going to have good chances to win, more or less. That's his idea. That's his winning plan. And on the queen side, yes, Black does have 4 pawns against 3 pawns, but it's a lot more difficult for him to mobilize them because of the doubled c-pawns. So now knight e4 by White to centralize the knight, make it possible to go to the g5 square, and really, yeah, just centralize the pieces and get ready to, for whatever happens. Pretty flexible move. And so bishop e7, flexible as well. Sometimes you see c5 in the Berlin for Black, and followed by bishop d7, in which case he can manage to activate the bishop on those lines. And it kind of depends on personal taste and what your opponent's playing, what's the best plan. So a5 certainly makes sense. Want to go ahead and activate that rook along the a file. Would be nice if Black didn't have to play b6 and king b7. So a5 makes sense, and in exchange Caruana counters with a4. So not gonna activate that rook that easily. And now c5. And the idea behind c5 can be to play bishop c6, or also to play rook a6 and to develop the rook along the 6th rank. And so after c5, white plays c4. This is also another idea you see a fair amount, pretty commonly, that if white isn't careful, and let's say plays rook e1, then black goes ahead with c4. And a temporary or permanent, if you will, a pawn sacrifice to double these pawns, but not really so temporary, as a pawn on a4 would be hanging. And so if black can get rid of those double pawns, well, he'll have the two bishops, and he'll have a pretty solid game, all in all, if he can open it up. And so Caruana attentive, he plays c4 and doesn't allow that. And now rook a6, and so the rook can develop along the 6th rank, possibly going to g6 to prevent even more white from playing g4, or possibly to e6. It's a somewhat frequent idea in the Berlin defense for black to develop along the 6th rank, but it's kind of tough to pull off because it is somewhat specific. So now black's idea is going to be to not just gain space, but if he can play g5 and play rook g6, for example, he's going to be getting some legitimate kingside pressure. And so Caruana's got his own pressure in the center, and he plays rook fd1. So now bishop c6, and all of a sudden this rook, I guess Eljanov didn't, I don't know, I mean, the rook is kind of out of play now on rook a6. Would be better if he had played b6 and king b7 and activated the rook through the center by normal means. At least, as the position looks now. And so, yes, he could play bishop takes f3, and then after rook takes f3, it's almost like white's up a pawn. And black doesn't have a lot of compensation, if any, because, I mean, technically the material count is the same, but it's going to be very difficult for black to mobilize the pawns on the queen side as the pawns are doubled. And white would, have an extra pawn on the king side. So g5, so he's got a pretty good attack going, but knight d5. And so now there's a lot of things going on in the position. I mean, so bishop takes, it's definitely g4 was definitely an idea, but I believe that black was afraid of, or really didn't want to see knight d2, and rerouting the knight to e4 is going to be excellent positioning of the knights in the center. And so he just decided to go ahead and take one. Why not? And I don't know, I just think his whole plan from here on was not so fantastic. After rook d8, he's just kind of playing defense. I mean, he gave white this excellent center in the middle. I think he should have just maintained the pressure and not taken the knight on d5 more than anything. Now bishop c3, a fantastic move by Caruana, very attentive in this game, because now black can no longer play rook g6, which would help him out with his counterplay on the king side, because he's just going to drop a pawn on a5. And if he plays b6, obviously that rook on a6 is going to be just stuck in the corner. So g4, and now knight e1. I suppose quite a difference, possibly. I'm not 100%. Maybe knight d2. There was a few ideas, some different ideas. Maybe black can play c6, although it seems kind of risky. This knight d2 seems interesting. Maybe there's a couple tactical ideas for black. I don't quite see them though. But anyway, I mean, knight e1, maybe just making sure there's not going to be a problem. And bishop g5 seems good to put the bishop on a better diagonal. And now f6, and I just didn't understand this move. Why give white? I mean, okay, there's an idea that they're overextended, these pawns here, but and maybe you can pick one off. But I mean, with h4, why play f6? And so now f4, pawn takes, and the knight just comes right back into play. And so I guess that was Caruana's idea with knight e1. He can just play f4 and bring it back in. And now h3. So not taking this pawn on g3 and believing it's more of a weakness than worth taking, and letting this knight reroute to e4. Rook d6. So finally the knight gets back in the game. And after takes, and bishop e5, rook b6, and I think the game is over now after rook f3. rook b4, and now rook d8. And Eljanov resigned because it seems like there's nothing you can do. Knight e8 is answered by e7, instantly winning a piece. And anything else, rook e8, simply takes, rook f8, bishop f6, winning the knight with mate. So other than that, I don't really see too much game for white, or for black rather. Let's say if he played rook to e4, seems the best try. I think white is just winning. It almost seems like in all of the lines here with his connected passed pawns, let's say the easiest e7, and now removing the defender. So a very nice game, very clean game by Caruana. Definitely a solid victory. And this is Will Stewart from OnlineChessLessons.net, and thanks for tuning in.